Good evening and welcome to our last news bulletin coming to you live from the News Hub here at Adesawe in Accra. My name is Grace Hamwa Asare. If you're watching us on DSTV, this is channel 279. First, let's take a look at the major news highlights. Fishers at the Jamestown Fishing Harbour in Accra are jubilating over a bumper catch as the fishing season peaks. However, there is still cause for concern as consumers cannot afford to buy the types of fish being caught. Also, recent days of heavy rains have led to the collapse of several bridges in the Ashanti region. Most communities have been cut off from urban centers, adversely impacting on economic activities in the affected areas. Now, Setra East District Health Directorate in the Ashanti region has seen a drastic decline in maternal mortality as it has not recorded any maternal deaths since 2017 till June this year. The district health director attributed this to the strict implementation of interventions such as screening for early detection of pregnancy-related diseases. On the international front, Kenyan authorities have arrested the head of the agency that manages public land and the boss of the state's railway on suspicion of corruption over land allocation for the new $3 billion flagship Nairobi-Mombasa railway. Many thanks for joining us. We are also live on our various social media platforms, Facebook and Twitter. Let's start from the presidency because President Akufo-Addo has announced government's plans to enact a law to protect the free senior high policy. He says the legal framework is to avert politicization of the policy in the interests of a future generation. Reports by Benjamin Edu.
The president was speaking at a Derby of Chiefs and People of Biposo in the Setra Central District as part of his 5-day tour in the Ashanti region. He argued with a binding national development plan, every government must work progressively towards free senior high school policy. The free senior high school policy has been politicized by the two major political parties since its introduction in 2017. But President Akufo-Addo says the implementation of the free senior high school policy has put his critics to shame.
Mr. Ghana for you who said, a boy Michelle won't say, me baba yese, Nya say me kasakwa. Na de me adam kuma so a minim se me ba metumi aye etina me kato ho se me ba be ye ina mana ba me say free senior high school education no and na dim when I can say metumi ya no and so by this time they won't
at Biposum, the president announced plans to intensify rural electrification projects to hook every community to the national grid. The paramount chief of Biposo, Nana Buama Kwabi, said he has released land for the one district, one factory policy implementation. He also appealed to the president to help improve on road network in the area. Day 2 of the tour took the president and his team to Nsuta Palace, Biposo, Aframso and other communities in the Central District. He also visited the North American farms at Nkujua, Aframso, where the Ashanti regional representative of the Council of State, Nana Owusu Achau, has more than 400 acres maize farm. The farm also has a central pivot irrigation system for cultivation of vegetables in the dry season. The president also visited Wuntumi Farms at Asarin Kwanta and Rockland Farms at Ankamadua.
Now, the Economic Fighters League is calling for a collaboration to fight for jobs, adding the most pressing issue facing the youth is unemployment. The group is of the view decent jobs are central to the attainment of economic freedom. It further says lack of jobs is a threat to life. So I have been joined in the studio by president of the group or leader of the group, Ernesto Yeboah. Good evening to you, Ernesto.
Good evening.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
If you say you want to fight for jobs, what do you mean by that, and how do you intend doing that?
Well, thank you very much once again, Grace. And I think it's important to mention that the latest IMF World Bank report on Ghana shows that unemployment amongst the youth is about 48%, which means that out of every 10 young people you count in our country, you have about 4, close to 5 of them being unemployed. But you see, for how long would the IMF World Bank detect what happens in our country or what is happening to us? Because for some of these statistics, I'm sure when our leaders see them, it frightens them to inaction. And so we do not want to find ourselves in that space where power appears to be in the hands of IMF rather than in the hands of the people. So if the people are unemployed, then the Economic Fighters League is more or less evoking that basis on which the people begin to assume their rights, assume their powers in the space that they occupy. If you are unemployed, then step out. Let the people of Ghana, see, let the world see that unemployment is truly an issue in our country. We don't want to hear it from the IMF World Bank and then later on hear them impose conditionalities on our governments. We queue, to vote. We defy the rain. We defy the sun. We sometimes even defy distance in order to be able to cast our ballot to choose our leaders. So we can't accept the situation where our leaders are constantly listening to the IMF World Bank other than us.
So how do you intend going about this fight for the jobs?
Well, we know that it's a battle that we cannot fight alone. And it's a national issue. And so we hope that by calling for the collaboration of other organizations, civil society bodies, youth organizations, activist groups, and all of that, we can all join hands to be able to bring about the change that we are looking for. On our side, what we have done is we have the Business and Enterprise Development Command of the Economic Fighters League, which is seen to the needs of our people in terms of how to polish up their ideas, create entrepreneurial enterprises, one way or the other. We would be coming up very soon with our fighters farms and all of that, but that is not enough. We believe that some people have been paid to think and create jobs for our people, and therefore we are not going to be the substitute in terms of what they ought to be doing. Somebody can be taking 11,000 a month, taking free fuel, free, accommodation, free almost everything, to think and create jobs for our people, and yet, they won't do it. So we are not going to allow them to shift the responsibility on us. And that's why we want to see how we can come together and force them to do what they have to do.
So government has a lot of interventions, for example, the NEIP and others. How have you encouraged your members to participate or take advantage of some of these interventions?
Well, government is obviously trying to tackle that situation. They've even come up with NAPCO and all of that. But we think that it is not enough. We think that it's high time that the resource question, comes to life once again. We cannot have a situation where we do not control our economy. When we are told that the economy grew by 8.7% in terms of our GDP, the question is, whose economy is that? Do we control our gold? Do we control our bauxite? Do we control our oil? 86.5% of our oil is still owned and controlled by white monopoly capital. So on what basis do they talk about economic growth when, I mean, it has absolutely no reflection on the people on whom, I mean, power resides?
And so I want to wish you and the team well so that this advocacy doesn't end here, but it gets to whoever that needs to hear about the call. Ernesto Yeboah is group leader of the economic fighters, joining me in the studio, talking about the need to reduce the teeming unemployment rate in the country. You're still watching News at 10 here on TV3. We're back with some more stories after this break. Don't go away. Welcome back from the break. This is still News at 10 on TV3. If you're watching us on DSTV, this is channel 279. Member of Parliament for Builsa South, Dr. Clement Apak, says the appointment of a minister-designate to the office of the Vice President is unconstitutional. The first ministerial reshuffle announced on Thursday, August 9, saw the Member of Parliament for Medina, Boniface Abubakar Sadiq, who is Minister for Inner City and Zongo Development, being reassigned to the office of the Vice President. But the Builsa South MP insists the office of the Vice President is not a unique entity, but exists only because of the President and cannot be assigned a minister. Let's go on the phone lines now and speak with the MP for Builsa South, Dr. Clement Apak. Good evening to you, Doc. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Good evening to your viewers and listeners as well.
Doc, so you insist this reshuffle, so that the movement of the minister is unconstitutional. Why do you still stand by it?
Well, if you read the full extent of my commentary, I sought to analyze and bring to the fore the fact that you can only reassign a minister to the presidency or office of the president. The reason is very simple. The vice president is a component of the presidency, and they cannot be a vice president without a president. And so to reassign a minister directly to the office of the vice president would presuppose that the office of the vice president is being seen by an entity on its own. What the language should have been, and to which I think perhaps is an error in communication, should have been reassigning the minister to the office of the president with special duties at the office of the vice president. Because you cannot reassign a minister to the office of the president. Everyone who works at the presidency works for the president, and the vice president is included in the persons who work in the interest of the president.
So, Doc, can this have any repercussions or effects on the system at the presidency?
Yes, I mean, a lot of people can try to stretch it and try to make various interpretations as far as they are concerned. But it is simply not right, because if we were to isolate it just for the sake of academic argument, then one could even argue further that the only time that you can assign a minister to the office of the vice president is if that person is appointed and vetted specifically to be assigned to the office of the vice president, which doesn't exist. This is very strange to our constitution. So the only time that one can be assigned to any office at the presidency is to be assigned to the office of the president and then be given special responsibilities in the office of the vice president or in the office of the chief of staff, or just to serve the president as a minister of state at the office of the president. But you cannot have a minister of state assigned to the office of the vice president as though the vice presidency is a unique entity on its own.
Doc, let me stay a while longer with you, but away from the reshuffle to another issue where the Danish ambassador to Ghana, Tove Dengmo, has said Danish businesses and companies operating in the country are often confronted with demands of paying illegal fees to authorities. You are a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament. What's your reaction to these comments?
Well, I certainly have an issue with the effort being made by diplomats to in fact, try to help expose what you may call the challenges in our system. And for the Danish ambassador to have made a public pronouncement, and in terms of my own monitoring, she is not the first person, and indeed this is not the first time that she has made such a comment to the effect that Danish businesses and companies doing work in Ghana are pressured to pay bribes without going a step further to, for example, indicate the entities, persons, and or authorities who pressure these Danish companies and businesses to pay bribes is worrisome. To me, the diplomatic community is not serving us well in the fight against corruption if they are aware of entities, persons, and authorities, as she indicated, pressuring businesses and companies from their countries to pay bribes, and yet are failing to expose those persons and entities to us as a people, or better yet, register complaints with recognized entities in our system mandated to deal with such issues. So the point I'm simply making is that rather than talking about it and complaining about it at every opportunity, as the former American ambassador to Ghana, Ambassador Jackson, what I expect the diplomatic community to do in assisting us in the fight against corruption, which is a global challenge, is to be forthright in mentioning names, mentioning entities, mentioning authorities, and going forward to file complaints. The only way we can deal with the canker of corruption, graft, and fraud is if we are bold to name and shame. And for the diplomatic community not to have the courage to do what they know is right, it doesn't indicate their willingness to help us in the fight against corruption.
Doctor, you would prefer they go a step further in exposing these people who are denting their relations, but someone would argue that this can also have some effects on our international relations with other countries. You don't think so?
Well, in their own countries, I don't think that they would have sought to shield any official, any entity, or any authority that sought to take a bribe as a prerequisite to grant a service that that entity, person, or authority is already being paid to execute. And so I don't see any reason why they should have any qualms in doing what they know is right. Simply put, if they are not going to help us in the fight against corruption, knowing what they know, having the evidence that they speak about, and are only willing to communicate that to their parent countries, and yet take every opportunity on our local terrain to speak about what is wrong with our system, then they are not being fair to us, and they are not being fair to themselves, and they are not helping the global fight against corruption. So you either state it as it is, name and shame, report those persons, entities, and or authorities to the appropriate institutions for sanctions to be meted out, or stop complaining. It's as simple as that.
Thank you very much, Doc, for your time. Dr. Clement Apak is MP for NEWSAT South and a former presidential staffer who was speaking to us on the reshuffle of the Minister for Zongo and Inner Development to the office of the Vice President. Let's do some other stories. And Chief Operating Officer of the Rwanda Development Board, Emmanuel Hategeka, says the demand for accountability and the running of a transparent government is one of the major reasons for Rwanda's rapid economic growth. In an interview with TV3's Alfredo Kanse on the sidelines of the Africa Transformation Forum, Emmanuel Hategeka indicated the success story of Rwanda's development is as a result of a conscious and an effective local governance system.
Rwanda's economy is one of the fastest growing economies in the whole of Africa. Nicknamed the Singapore of Africa, Rwanda emerged from the ashes of economic despondency and tremendous decay in its infrastructure. The Rwandan economy has been rebuilt with a focus on technology, mining, tourism, and agriculture following the 1994 genocide. This development had been attributed largely by many to ingenuity, courage, competency, and turnaround management demonstrated by its leadership led by President Paul Kagame. In an exclusive interview with TV3, Chief Operations Officer of the Rwandan Development Board, Emmanuel Hategeka, said, accountability is held high at all levels of governance, especially at the district assembly level.
During that National Dialogue Council, all the districts, bring out what they did best. But then there's also the evaluation report that is released, and you don't want to be the last district being presented in that National Dialogue Council. We've seen mayors of districts go back and resign because they were the last on the list. But of course, the top 3 are rewarded, and the president gives them an award. The president really recognizes them, and they show that they have delivered.
He revealed targets given are known by all citizens, and performance contracts signed by government appointees at the central level are the yardstick for evaluation and reshuffles.
And the citizens keep holding us to account. So even at the central level, the performance contracts are effective because if you don't deliver on your targets, you really, there's a stick that you get. So there is a carrot and a stick in this case. And that is how we keep trying to narrow the gap between very good intentions and actual implementation.
Out of the ashes of horrific genocide, President Paul Kagame has been credited with the resuscitation of the economy, curtailed corruption, and maintained political stability.
The Forestry Commission has submitted some of its staff accomplices in the encroachment on the Sakumo Ramsar site. Chief Executive Kojo Owusu-Afriyie told a stakeholder meeting in Accra the Commission was compelled to transfer such staff to pave way for smooth efforts at solving the problem.
Ramsar site, also known as the Sakumo Lagoon, is a wetland of international importance covering over 1,340 hectares of land area. Unfortunately, years of less supervision and selfish interest have reduced the size of the international Ramsar site to more than half. Sadly enough, the encroachers have now moved deep into the wetlands, blocking the waterways with all kinds of structures. An attempt by the Wildlife Division of the Forestry Commission to demolish unauthorized structures on the Ramsar site on July 14, 2018 was met with resistance. Some of the aggrieved encroachers openly accused the Forestry Commission staff of being part of the problem.
Go away, please. Don't talk to me.
This was vehemently denied by officials of the commission.
No, we are not saying that we allow them to build, but the chiefs and the people prevented our people, took over the land illegally and built. But we, as Forestry Commission, have not given permission to anyone.
But contributors at a stakeholder meeting in Accra insisted staff of the commission cannot escape blame over the unacceptable encroachment of the Ramsar site lands.
Police have been sent around to arrest us just for us not to do our mandated activities that we're supposed to do to conserve the place.
This brought the Chief Executive Officer, Kojo Owusu-Afriyie, onto the floor to admit the assertion, indicating some of those staff have long been transferred.
It takes time even before you continue to build on. So somebody would have seen it. And it amazes me why my people do not see it. And I agree with Kwesi when he says that our own people, my own people, are part of the problem. They have not been helping us. They go out there, collude and connive with people, sell the property, the land, and then they keep their eyes off. And then they would be telling you that, some of them will be telling you, Chief will come here next week. So maybe it's quick, be quick. And I'm not very happy about that situation, and we are dealing with that internally here.
Now, news coming in from our sources in Mecca indicates one Ghanaian pilgrim has died in Mecca. Sheikh Mohammed Hassim is a resident of Kumbungu and is among Ghanaians from the northern region who have arrived in Saudi Arabia to commence the 2018 Holy Journey to Mecca. We bring you more on this story in our subsequent bulletins, but that's the news coming in. One Ghanaian pilgrim has died in Saudi Arabia. This is still News at 10 on TV3. Before we take leave of you, here is a wrap of how our cartoonist Tilapia captured the major news items of the week from his perspective. So you can follow our in-house cartoonists on the various social media platforms at Tilapia. But that's how we wrap this edition of News at 10 on TV3. Many thanks for joining us. If you watched us on DSTV, then it is channel 279. My name is Grace Hamwasari. Many thanks for joining us.